Redditors who have had sex with their teacher or professor, what is your story? Didn't stop any of my teachers, but in 12th grade I used to have a lit teacher that took a real unhealthy interest in me. She would rest her boobs on my shoulder and come within inches of my face when explaining things to me. She was super young and very attractive. In hindsight, I was much too oblivious to pick up on these signs, and even if I had, I would never have the tires to try anything. Didn't your dad ever teach you to rotate your tires? You know, to avoid uneven wear. So the rubber never met the road, huh? I had a teacher, she was older, but she used to wear these short skirts. I would just be distracted all through the lessons. Then one day she called me out for my being so distracted, and I just blurted it out. It was risky, you know, but it was out. She kind of took over the seduction from there. There wasn't any sort of problem finding a place for all the illicit activity, because I guess that's the advantage of being homeschooled and all. You mother ducker, I should have known. Take my like.
A girl in my class started banging our 23-year-old maths teacher. It wasn't as bad as you'd probably think it was, seeing as how she was a senior and 18, but she had a lot of issues at home. Her mom died a month earlier, and she had a pretty horrible relationship with her dad. They dated for about a year after graduation, but he ended up being fired from the school, and he dumped her after she kept pestering him about getting married.
No serious tag?
That Veronica Vaughn is one piece of ace.
I always knew I was smart, and so did my family, but I hated school and never considered going to college. I was barely making it after a year into attending an Ivy League I couldn't afford to go to, coming from a big family with rogue parents. I thought you only had to sign up for student aid once when you started attending, so when my sophomore year rolled around after a tough summer of doing construction, I couldn't sign up for classes right away, even though I was accepted to be an RA in the dorms. Once I could, I had slim pickings and had to take this critical theory course that wasn't in my major. I showed up a week into it, and it was a 10-person class, tiny. So I had to introduce myself to everyone, and the professor, who was a total babe, wasn't sure I was supposed to be there, considering this class wasn't in my major. I proved I could handle the content, and she told me to stop by her office that afternoon to catch up on the course. I showed up, and she was shrewd with how I could make up the few assignments I missed. I noticed her shirt had a few more buttons undone than in class, and by now I wasn't thinking about the class at all. I told her my intentions. I wanted to duck her. She said, "What?" So I repeated my intentions. One thing led to another, and we were banging casually for a while. It was good. I like her a lot. We were at her place, and we were just laying in bed when her husband comes home, who I did not know about, but it was cool because they were in some sort of open relationship. It also turns out she had a son. I'll get to him. So I was hooking up with my professor on the DL with her husband's permission. How could things get better? How could things go wrong? I ended up having a lot of feelings for her, and that's where things go wrong. You know, you never really think about how much someone means to you until you don't have them anymore. I fell in love with my professor and became possessive, wanted to have her to myself. She had a husband, and that was already more than I could handle. Then I heard some rumor of her sleeping with another student. That was it. I was walking to her house when I saw some other guy walk out of her house. Not knowing she had a son at that point, and not knowing that guy was in fact her son, I beat the living S out of him. I was feeling everything deeply at this point and drank a lot. Things were already heading downhill when a picture of this professor naked in my bed leaked and the university administration found out who was involved. Now, the picture, I later found out, was stolen from my phone from a jealous ex-girlfriend. Either way, the damage was done. She immediately cut ties with me, and I went into a complete mental breakdown and nearly drank myself to death. I certainly was mentally unwell for a while and walked to her house drunk to talk to her. She never did talk to me after that. I definitely learned my lesson. Summer between my 8th and 9th grade. I spent the summer with a friend that lived on the lake. My 8th grade English teacher had a house near his. We met on the island, where everyone went to swim. She asked if we wanted to stop by later that evening. Her husband only came down on the weekends. She had beer and whiskey. My friend stayed drunk all summer and I got laid all summer. Best summer of my life. Throw away for obvious reasons. I'm a professor of philosophy and literature at a pretty renowned university in the US. I've had 2 relationships with students, both while being married. My wife and I had had a non-monogamous relationship at the time, but obviously, there are some that would frown upon those choices, and fraternizing with students is definitely not allowed. The first was a woman I met at an art gallery opening. She was in her early 20s, I was 35 at the time, very pretty and an artist herself, from Sweden. I didn't know she was a student at the university till several weeks into our relationship. Everything was going well till that point, we had fun together, the sex was great, no attachments. But then she wanted to get more seriously involved, wanted to start taking my class as a student, and that's where I ended it. The second was another young woman, from the southern United States, who was in a class I taught. She was 22 at the time, I was 45 by now, and from the first or second class, I could tell she was really into me, a fairly often occurrence among young university students with their first exposure to a young-ish professor. She was also one of the most drop-dead gorgeous women I had ever met, in the prime and vibrancy of her youth. I resisted for a while, but we eventually went for a drink, ended up at hers, and embarked on one of the most passionate relationships of my life. My wife was away in Copenhagen, teaching a seminar for 3 months, so I had a lot of time I could spend with her. We'd spend days in bed, making love, talking, laughing. It was pretty great. Things cooled off once my wife returned, but we continued our relationship for almost a year after. Eventually, my wife and I decided we were going to close the door on this non-monogamous stage of our marriage, and the girl also wanted to move on to graduate school. Both were great experiences. Monogamy is a societal concept relatively new to society, and it's not for everyone.
Your last comment is a very wise one. I am not sure when monogamy became so widespread. Well, actually I don't think it ever has, it is just that promiscuity, adultery and polygamy have gone underground.
Puff said he'll give me an A if I give him my complete collection of MLP katanas and a blowy joey. Do you? I go to a college that has a long history as a women's liberal arts school, co-ed since 1989. Back in the day, it wasn't uncommon for students in research positions or other sort of mentee relationships to evolve. In fact, there are still a few tenured profs that left their wives to marry their students back in the 70s hanging around.
Well, not mine, but I met a mid-40s French professor who just discovered Tinder and got out of an LTR. Came to my country to visit, and the contrast from having intellectual conversation and talking about professional stuff to railing her out was really something.
One of my teachers was a student at my school that married another teacher there right after college, so I'm pretty sure they banged while she was in school.
Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, click on the like button, comment, and subscribe to our channel.